Hi guys, today's mini lesson is going to be on hazard communication, which is otherwise known as HazCom or chemical safety or right to know. And it's all dealing with safety around chemicals. These are chemicals that are not meant for human consumption, and it's anything that you would be exposed to or using on the job site. You have the right to know uh, any of the hazards that exist with a chemical that you're going to be using. And you can find that out before you actually use it. There's two components to the program. One is the safety data sheet, which is where you find all of the information, and the other is container labeling. If you transfer a chemical to another container out of its original one, then you have to label it, and there are some guidelines to that. This is something that is for everybody in the company. It's not just for management. If you have a chemical in inventory, it doesn't matter for how long, you have to have a safety data sheet for it, or at least have access to one. And if you do transfer a chemical into another container, the OSHA standard says that as long as it remains in your control, and it will be transferred back to the original container before the end of the work shift, you don't have to label it. But most companies, and we do this at the school, most companies will say, no matter how long it's transferred, even if it's for a few minutes, you have to label the container, because you never know when it might be out of your control. You might get called away to do something else. Something bad might happen and you're not available. So those are the two components. The first one is going to be safety data sheets. And a few years ago and prior to that, they were referred to as material safety data sheets, or MSDS. Now they're just SDS, safety data sheet. And I'm going to show you the 16 sections to them. Just a real quick hit. This is one on WD-40. And you can see it actually says material safety data sheet. This is one that was printed a little while ago. Again, there are 16 sections to them, and they tell you about the manufacturer, what chemicals make it up, the product, firefighting measures, first aid measures, what do you wear for PPE, what precautions do you have to take, how do you store it, how do you dispose of it, how do you transport it, all those kinds of things. Again, we'll look at this more in depth later this summer when we do our actual training. So anything that you need to know is going to be on that sheet. And an employer is supposed to keep a copy of all of the safety data sheets, typically in a binder in one place where everybody knows where it is and everybody has access, so that if you have a question, you can go find it. Of course, today we've got the internet. Most of this can be found on the internet. However, you can't rely on finding it when you need it in an emergency. So this is something that has to be done in advance to make sure you have access to it, okay? At the school, we actually use a system that is purely online, but we take the time at the beginning of the year or when we get a chemical in inventory to make sure that the safety data sheet is there. That way, if we ever need it, we have access to it. Okay, so that's safety data sheets. The other part of this is going to be the container labeling. So this is important because most chemicals come in a container. They're fully labeled. They put precautionary statements on them. They give you pictograms and all those kinds of things. And I'm going to grab, I had a bottle of carbon choke cleaner here. You can't really transfer this out of the bottle unless you're using it. But on the back, you can see all, if I can hang that, all of the directions in many different languages. There's some pictograms there. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you were dealing with a chemical that you were taking out of its original container, you have to label it. Now, if I bring up this container, and some of you guys might recognize it, we've used it in the kitchen. If anybody uses contacts, wears contacts, and you have contact solution, you would recognize this as a contact solution bottle. And the contents are clear. I mean, it looks like water, but again, if you deal with contacts, you would say, hey, that's contact solution in there. So if this wasn't labeled and it was laying around, and let's say somebody got something in their eye, they deal with contacts, they know that, ooh, I can flush my eye with that, and they go and start flushing. Well, in this case, it happens to be bleach. okay? Think of Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew is a lime green color. It's in a green bottle, and a lot of guys that work in shops will drink it. So let's say you got a bottle of Mountain Dew going on your bench. You're working on a car and you got to take some antifreeze out, some extra antifreeze. What color is antifreeze? At least the original style. Okay, it was the same lime green color as Mountain Dew. So you take your Mountain Dew bottle, you've got a couple swigs left in it, so you empty it, drink the rest, and you take the excess antifreeze, put it into the bottle. Let's say you got it half full, and you just put it back on your bench because it's good antifreeze and you're going to use it a little later for something. Well, somebody else comes along, oh, hey, Mountain Dew, and they decide to play a joke on you and drink the rest of your Mountain Dew. Well, they just ingested antifreeze. And even if you went to the point of taking the label off, everybody knows what a Mountain Dew bottle looks like. And if you looked at the contents inside, you would see that antifreeze looks like Mountain Dew. You wouldn't know the difference until you actually started to consume it. So these are just a couple of examples of why container labeling is pretty important. So there are some parameters to this. You do have to do proper labeling, and OSHA has come up obviously with standards for this. Every label has to have certain components to it. They don't all have to look exactly alike, but you've got to have some particular components to it. And I'm going to try to do this without the wind blowing everything away. But if I use the bleach container, you guys can see at the top there's a product ID, bleach. Okay, we know what it is. The warning statement there basically tells you that there's something that you've got to be concerned about with this. Okay, it's not just water. The corrosive pictogram is part of the pictograms. There's 9 of them total that tell you right off the bat, okay, this is corrosive. Okay, some of them are a health hazard, environmental hazard, explosion hazard, fire. They all have their own pictograms. Then we have a section here where it shows what PPE you should be wearing if you're going to be using the bleach. Okay, and then on the bottom, try to move my hand, there's a precautionary statement there as well. And that's just going to tell you the primary things that you've got to worry about when you're using this product. So that's an example of container labeling. And it depends on what it is for a chemical, what you're putting it into a container as to what type of a label you're going to use. But you have to make sure that you have all of the information that is required on that label. Just labeling it bleach with black Sharpie isn't adequate because it doesn't tell you, the important things that you need to know very quickly, especially if things go wrong. So as a recap, Haz a Communication, it's your right to know what chemicals you're going to be working with and what information you need to know to use them and handle them safely. That's all going to be found on a safety data sheet. It's not just for management. It doesn't matter how long you have a chemical in inventory, you have to have that SDS. If you're going to transfer into another container, you have to put a proper label on it with all of the right information. I'll give you guys the quiz. I'll send the pic with this remind link. And if I can, I'll try to link it on the YouTube site as well. Have a good day. Until next time.